Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. Today I'm going to talk about police brutality. Recently there's been another incident of police brutality. And this time it occurred in Missouri, in Ferguson, Missouri. A young, unarmed African American boy who's 18 years old was killed by the police. He was shot multiple times by the police. And after he was shot, his body just laid in the middle of the street like a dog, like an animal. And, again, there's outrage in the community. Here we go again, another black life snuffed out by the police. This is another reminder that black life has little to no value in this country. Now, there were witnesses on the scene, and they say that a police officer started to yell at two young men walking in the street. And the police officer actually reached out of the car and grabbed one of them around the neck. That's according to one of the witnesses. And they say that Michael Brown had his hands in the air and he wasn't posing a threat at the time when he was shot. Again, he was shot multiple times. Now, the police are claiming that the brother pushed the officer back in the car. The police claim that the officer was coming out of the car and Michael Brown pushed the officer back in the car and started to struggle with the officer to grab the officer's gun. They say that one shot went off in the car and then there were shots, fired later outside of the car. So that's the police officer's story. That's what they claim occurred. One interesting thing about both stories is, the fact that there is one thing that's consistent, and that's the fact that when he was shot, when Michael Brown was shot, he was away from the vehicle at the time. And my question is, did he pose a threat at the time when he was shot? Did he actually reach for this gun? There should be a thorough and full investigation to uncover what actually occurred here. And that's what, plenty of civil rights activists are pushing for. That's what the community is pushing for. And it should be a prompt investigation. The people in the community are outraged, and rightly so. I understand their outrage. And, unlike a lot of people, I don't trust the police. I don't give them the benefit of the doubt because I know that too often police officers tell stories. They fabricate accounts so that they can protect themselves. And as I heard about the police officer's account of what occurred, I immediately thought about the scene in Training Day. The scene where Denzel Washington's character goes to a drug dealer's house, shoots the drug dealer, and Denzel's there with some other officers. And then the officers get together and they make up a story to justify the shooting of this drug dealer. And too often that's what happens in these cases. They always say that someone was reaching for their gun or they thought the person had a gun. They always come up with some kind of explanation or justification for taking another black life. And that's what's happening here. And this situation reminds me of what happened in New York a couple of weeks ago when the brother, Eric Garner, was strangled by the police. Despite there being video evidence of these police holding this brother down, of one of the officers actually choking the brother, the police claim that there was no chokehold. They even deny the evidence that's in the autopsy report. This is the police mentality that we're talking about. And this is why people like myself and many people in the community don't trust the police. And, so I understand the people's outrage. And I think the outrage is justified. The problem is, we always have these incidents that occur. And people are mobilized for a second You know, they're outraged for a second. They're ready to take action for a second. But then that moment leaves and people are on with their daily lives and they, you know, business continues as usual. You know, it's the usual situation. Instead of moments, we need movements that are organized, that are structured, that are prepared to deal with these situations before they even occur. We need to deal with these problems in our community. And, you know, too often, you know, they have these pastors that come out to the community. And Malcolm X has talked about this in many of his speeches, how they have these people who are not really about mobilizing and organizing the people. They are about containing the people and pacifying the people. They are about telling the people to pray and to have visuals and vote and stuff like that. And all those things are important. But they are no replacement for sustained, organized resistance to oppression. You know, Trayvon Martin was killed, and people were up in arms, and you know they protested for a moment. And then after this man, that killer George Zimmerman, got away, people were upset, and you know there were a couple of little protests here and there around the country, organized by a particular group, and that was the end of it. You know, the killer walked free and lived happily ever after. We can't allow these kind of things to continue. We cannot forget the fallen. I mean, most people nowadays, they couldn't care less about the plight of Trayvon Martin. They've already forgotten a brother. Well, I haven't. And in his memory and the memory of all these other fallen brothers and sisters, we need to organize a resistance to this brutality. We need to engage in acts of resistance, acts of protest. And I don't condone riots. You know, I don't think that they produce anything. But I understand the frustration of the people. Eventually, somebody has to stand up to these police. It is time to end this police brutality that we constantly experience in our communities. In the 60s, the Panthers stood up to the police. Will we stand up?